I think you're part of that. Joe Rogan's part of that. People that allow people to come on from all different guises and have their say and be challenged and talk about what they believe. But ultimately that we genuinely do believe in the power of free speech, and people are not afraid to say what they think. It's so
or
weird.
They say it anyways, even if they are afraid.
Or they do what, this is why Donald Trump.
And like Susan Boyle.
Right. And it's also why people like Donald Trump are so popular.
Yeah.
He's popular because he says what he thinks. He doesn't give a damn.
I know, he can't even help it. He made an erection joke during the presidential debate.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, that takes a lot of go. And
Of
I know
course.
I watched him, I thought, he can't even help it. That's one of the things that's very interesting about him. He is insanely funny. And, this is also, I don't think that people with dictatorial tendencies are marked by their sense of humor.
No.
So now, does Trump make jokes at his own expense? See, I don't know that.
No.
But he's no. Okay.
I've never heard. Well, he might if he thinks it actually makes him look good in the long run.
Okay.
But I think Trump is not a great self-joker.
Uh-huh.
He is a narcissist. I've got no doubt about that. But he is very entertaining.
Very.
And I will say to people, if you watch a Trump rally speech for 2 hours and you don't laugh once, you've got a problem. Because he can be very, very funny.
Very funny.
Now, it's a sharp humor. It's a brutal humor.
Yeah.
It's a New York trader kind of humor.
Yeah.
Most New York real estate guys are like Trump. It's the environment he grew up in. And you're a product of your environment to a large degree. But he, I've known him a long time.
Yeah.
He can make me laugh like very few people. I mean, he's genuinely laugh out loud funny.
Yeah,
I remember
definitely.
talking to him about Theresa May, that it was then British Prime Minister, and by common consent, extremely boring. And when she left office, he'd been president, but she was prime minister briefly. And he called me for a catch-up conversation. We were having a chat. He said, by the way, what happened to Theresa May? I went, well, funny enough, I'm just reading a story this morning that she's now on the speaker circuit. He went, what? I went, yeah, she's getting £140,000 a speech. And Trump, are you effing kidding me? He said, I'd pay £140,000 not to hear her speak. Now, that's just funny.
Yeah.
Now, I wrote about that, and she then ripped me very amusingly at a magazine. The Spectator magazine had an awards thing, and she tore me to pieces over that and got a big laugh herself. So
Good for her.
There were no losers here.
Yeah.
In fact, the funniest work came at my expense when I was having a laugh with President Trump about how boring she was. So good, well done her. But the point being, it was a funny line. It's just he's a naturally sharp, funny,
definitely,
quite witty guy. Now, he's got lots of faults, but if you try and pretend he hasn't got that in his armory, you will never understand the appeal of Donald Trump.
That's for sure.
Which is, he's not like any other politician. He shoots.
Well, and working class humor tends to be rough.
Yes.
And so Trump pulls that off extremely well. Yeah, of course. Definitely.
No question. I mean, I come from a village of working class people predominantly when I grew up, and that's absolutely the humor. It's sharp, it's brash, it's in your face.
Right. It's the worst thing you can say and the worst thing you can take.
Yeah.
That's kind of the judge of character.
Yeah.
And it's a very fun game. It's something I really missed as I sort of climbed up the intellectual
Are your best
ladder.
friends people that you laugh at or with, or people who laugh at you?
Yeah.
In other words, have you got the ability to laugh at yourself as much as others? I look at my friends and I think, actually, most of my best friends, if they didn't have the ability to laugh at themselves, I couldn't really be friends with them.
Right, of course.
And if they couldn't let me mock them in the way that I'm quite happy to be mocked myself, which I am, I'm not sure I could be a friend of someone like that. Because I think it's such a key component to surviving life. Is
That's how you transcend your own stupidity.
We're all pretty absurd, right? And I think that once you realize that, there's a great scene in Fawlty Towers, one of the great comedy series of all time. Only 12 episodes ever got made with John Cleese. There's a great scene where he's got this cast of completely ridiculous characters in the hotel from hell. And they're all bonkers. And at one stage, Cleese, his character Basil Fawlty, is the most bonkers of all. And he's standing in the middle of them. He goes, my God, he said, am I the only normal person around here? And it always makes me laugh out loud. Because actually, none of us are normal. The beauty of being a human being is we're all slightly abnormal. We're all slightly nuts. I think everyone has it in them to be slightly nuts. But the common thread of my friends and people that I gravitate to is an ability for me to take the piss out of them and they laugh. And you can only really be like that if you yourself can take it, which I can. There's very little that would ever upset me. or that I wouldn't laugh at if it's a joke at my expense. And I think that can be a disarming quality with people.
The less your business spends on operations, on multiple systems, and on delivering your product or service, the more money you keep. But with higher expenses on materials, employees, distribution, and borrowing, everything costs more. To reduce costs and headaches, smart businesses are graduating to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one platform and one source of truth. With NetSuite, you can reduce IT costs, cut the cost of maintaining multiple systems, and improve efficiency by bringing all your major business processes into one platform and slashing manual tasks and errors. Over 37,000 companies have already made the move. Why haven't you? By popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/JBP. That's netsuite.com/JBP. netsuite.com/JBP.
So let me ask you, I've done a couple of interviews of some of your increasingly famous, internationally famous UK subjects. So I talked to Nigel Farage this week and Tommy Robinson. So I want to ask you about a number of people on the UK political front. So let's start with Keir Starmer. So in Canada, we have a Liberal government, although it's not a Liberal government. It's a radical socialist government. Trudeau is farther to the left by a large margin than our leftist political party has been traditionally. And I got to tell you, it's a bit of a disaster, you might say. Canada now has, our GDP is 60% per capita of that of the US, right? We have real estate prices that are twice as expensive. And those are just the things we know about. And so I would say the leftist tilt in Canada over the last 9 years has been a much worse disaster than we even know yet. And now I can understand why people here turfed out the Conservatives because, well, by my estimation, they weren't Conservatives at all. But God only knows what sort of pack they've brought in. So what are your thoughts about, well, what do you think's on the table for the UK for the next 4 years?
Well, I've interviewed Starmer a few times.
Yeah.
I've done him for my Life Story show, which is like a 2.5-hour interview. And I think, probably like you probably believe, that if you interview someone for 2.5 hours, they can't hide the entire time.
Yeah.
You're going to work out really what they're like. I think he's fundamentally a decent guy.
Yeah.
I think he's a kind of regular guy. There's nothing particularly flamboyant or special about him. He's a self-made man. He had a very tough upbringing. His mother was very ill for a very long period of time, and he effectively was her carer a lot of the time. A bit disenfranchised from his dad, no money. And he rose to become the top of the legal profession, Director of Public Prosecutions, the top lawyer in the country, and now he's risen to be the top politician in the country, to be Prime Minister. That's a pretty remarkable achievement.
Yeah.
He's no silver spoon guy at all. He is somebody who drifted out to the far left in the Jeremy Corbyn era, said he thought Corbyn would make a good Prime Minister. That's a blotch on his thought process, because Corbyn would have been a total mad far left disaster. But interestingly, and I think encouragingly, Starmer is not so intransigent in his views that he's not prepared to change. The example being the issue of trans women in women's sport. You know, he started off by saying that, you know, all trans women are women and should be treated as such.
Even the violent rapists.